This podcast is brought to you by the Maryland State Library Agency. The MSLA podcast features presenters from statewide youth programs, as well as learning opportunities for library staff and resources for patrons of the Maryland State Library for the Blind and Print Disabled.
Welcome back, everyone, for another LBPD guest hour. This month is about the Brain Injury Association of Maryland. And I am so excited because we have the executive director, Bryan Pugh, here with us. Bryan Pugh is a dedicated and passionate nonprofit executive director and educator with a strong track record in fundraising, events, community education, and program development. As the executive director of the Brain Injury Association of Maryland, Bryan has successfully improved the organization's sustainability through grant writing, event fundraising, and membership development. The website and 800 number handle over 2,000 visits and 300 calls per month. Since 2016, the Brain Injury Association of Maryland has curated and distributed a weekly e-newsletter, Five Thoughts Friday, that reaches over 6,000 recipients nationally and hosts a bi-monthly podcast called the Brain Injury Connector. That podcast provides education and inspirational stories for the brain injury community. Bryan also leads a weekly online national check-in chat support group. He's committed to making a positive impact on the lives of those in need, particularly those with brain injury, their families, and the healthcare community that serves them. Outside of work, he enjoys reading. Yay, as a librarian.
Yay.
Gotta say yay to that. Journaling, traveling, playing guitar, watching movies, and spending time with his family. So welcome, Bryan.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks so much for having me. This is really a great opportunity, and I'm so glad to be here.
I just gotta say, you have a voice for podcasts.
Yeah, I have a face for podcasts, is what I say. But yeah, I was DJ in college for a while, and take great joy in talking to people. So it's been really wonderful. We just started our 6th season of our podcast, Brain Injury Connector. Shameless plug, number 1, and there will be many others, I assure you. But so we have a real great opportunity, and I've been blessed to be able to talk to lots of really great people. So thank you.
No, not a problem. I'm going to jump in with our first question because
Sure.
This is, Traumatic Brain Injury Awareness Month is in March, and I'm guessing there are a lot of people who don't even realize that traumatic brain injury can happen. So what is the estimated number of people in Maryland living with long-term disability because of traumatic brain injury?
Well, it's pretty incredible. And one of the great challenges we have in this space, and we were talking a little bit off mic about this, is that, despite the fact of the numbers, and they are pretty staggering, right now the estimate is with the latest census, the latest numbers, we've got over 123,000 Marylanders living in our state, living with a TBI disability, so traumatic brain injury. And if you combine that with non-traumatic brain injuries, or what we call acquired brain injuries, including stroke, you've got up to 618,000 Marylanders living with these very, very challenging situations. And it's not just those individuals. The way we talk about it is that's 618,000 families. That's 618,000 neighborhoods and communities, because typically if somebody's injured to the extent that they're impaired, they're no longer able to be the PTA parent. They're no longer able to coach the basketball team. They're no longer able to be the deacon in the church, or they're no longer able to be the lector in the temple. So it's a hugely impactful number. We know most recently that there were over 35 or around 3,500 TBI related hospitalizations, and over 11,900 Marylanders who had to go to the ED, where their primary diagnosis was traumatic brain injury. So it continues to be an issue nationally. We're looking at probably 586 to 600 hospitalizations a day. That means people injured severely enough to have to spend overnight. And then, of course, the tragedy is about 190 people die every day of brain injury. So it's a huge number. We know that the vast majority of those folks the majority, fall into two categories. So they're going to be over 75 or under 5 are the ones that are getting, the injury, some of these injuries, and for a variety of reasons. The younger kids are a little more reckless, learning how to walk, things like that. The older population, and I kind of make the light joke of, the generation that believes they invented skateboarding, the generation that believes they invented surfing, the generation that believes they invented rock and roll, the generation that believes, that they created kite surfing, all these things so they grow up thinking that I can still do this, but they're writing checks that their bodies can't cash, And so, they're kind of thinking I can still, I used to be great on a skateboard, or I used to bike all over the world, and so they can put themselves into situations not realizing the challenges of just aging, regular aging. uh, you know, Balance gets impacted, and vision gets impacted, and hearing gets impacted, and you may be changing medications. There may be other things that can happen. So you may be creating situations where you're out doing an activity that normally you would do, and you can injure yourself. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is just with things like this and with all the other things is spread awareness about it. But the national trends are about 40% are falls. 40% of traumatic brain injuries are created by falls. A little bit less percentage are going to be blows against or for. That's when you're running into something or something, being hit by something, being struck by something. That can be your accidents. Motor vehicle accidents, which a lot of people think of as going to be the primary one, that falls, much less than actual falls. And then you have other things like situations in domestic violence, crime, things like that. So those are also impactful in brain injury. But falls is the number one. So fall prevention is really key.
I'm just imagining my 90-year-old grandparents. They are that generation that believes that they invented rock and roll.
Right.
They're still gallivanting around the country, and
Absolutely.
at
And
90
as
years
well
old.
they should. And there's no reason not to. It's just it's about awareness. It's about being mindful about those kinds of things, recognizing, that you may have to take things a little slower. You may have to, maybe give up those double black diamond runs and go for the blue runs, things like that. And it's really more about safety. And then, also the thing that I've been out, it's so January is Winter Sports Brain Injury Awareness Month. So that's one of our outreaches. And so I've been on TV stations over the last couple of weeks and radio programs and podcasts to try and talk about, just being aware of, when you're sledding, don't do it on a crazy hill, be aware of your surroundings, wear helmets. We're always really trying to get skiers and snowboarders, sledders to wear helmets just as an abundance of caution. And I just had a story 2 weeks ago of somebody who normally wouldn't wear a helmet, but decided, since they are getting up in age and they wanted to continue trying to do these more strenuous runs, they put a helmet on. And just that run towards the very bottom, they hit a patch of ice, went back, lost their skis, went back on their head and struck their head on ice. And he says, if I had had that helmet on, it could have been a whole lot worse. It was already challenging. It hurt, and it rang his bell, but by having the helmet, it prevented a significant injury. So yeah, we talk about anywhere, anytime, anyone. This isn't a blue state injury or a red state injury or a ethnic injury or a gender injury. It can happen to anybody at any time, particularly when you start including the ABI, the acquired brain injury. And we're talking there about strokes. We're also talking about overdoses. We're also talking about brain cancers, or all these other things that can happen. So it can be challenging.
It kind of makes me wonder how many new cases of traumatic brain injury are reported every year here in Maryland, because it sounds like if it can happen to anybody at any time for
Hmm.
reason, that number's got to be astronomical.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I talked about, the underreporting. We have hospital, we have emergency room visits, we have hospital admissions, but we
Mhm.
don't have people that maybe go to a minute clinic, or maybe go to their pediatrician, or just don't go anywhere at all. There's a lot of that. And so we know that it's significantly underreported. But you're getting these thousands and thousands and thousands of cases and admissions and overnights, and recognizing that the overnight hospitalization, that means it's significant, because they really do want to try and discharge people. Um, Length of recovery, we say every brain injury is different, every recovery is different, because every brain is different, which makes it kind of challenging when you're thinking about, how long it's going to take to sort of recover. Some people can recover in a couple of weeks. Some people it takes months, and some people just really don't ever fully recover, and have to find new ways of having a new normal.
That's hard.
Hmm.
That's really hard. A couple of my questions to you all focus on, we talk about focusing on stats.
Hmm.
Um, I think you answered this already, but just to reiterate, the leading cause of traumatic brain injury in Maryland, you said 40% is falls?
Yeah, falls, and that tracks nationally. It's about the
Oh, okay.
same. So the national trend is about 40%. Maryland is, I'm going to say, 38, whatever, just within 40, about 40%. So, the reality is, and like we talked about, it can be as simple, just coming off of right now, as we speak, there's snow on the ground in Maryland, and there's been snow on the ground for 4 weeks, and it melts and freezes and melts and freezes. And so, we know about black ice, and how slippery that can be and how challenging that can be. If my vision's kind of impaired, or the ice is under the snow and I'm not really paying close attention, that's a slip and fall, and that can really be a problem. And that's one of the reasons I was getting out, to talk about. Remember, sometimes your injury doesn't occur on the ski slope; it's in the parking lot trying to get to the ice rink. Because you step and slip and fall, and that's very common in this time with all this kind of stuff going on. Other times, changing a medication, my blood pressure medication or whatever I'm on, that can change. If I stand up too quickly, I can fall down. Being in the bathroom, of course, slip and fall. It's very easy to do that in the shower, standing, because of the wet and the slick. And then, when you're getting out doing things like, riding a bicycle without a helmet, or even riding a bicycle with a helmet, but doing jumps or doing motocross or things like that. One of the things that we worked very hard to get a helmet law passed for horses, riding horses, so equestrian events. So right now, as of October of last year, if you are riding on public lands, public pathways, public parks, or if you're in an equestrian facility and you're under 18 years of age, you need to have a helmet. You need to be wearing a helmet, because again, any kind of fall off of, even if you just fall, even if if you're not bucked off or thrown off, even if you just fall off a horse, you're falling essentially off of a step ladder,
Yeah.
right? And the smaller you are, the further you fall. And so, to have kids in helmets, again, it might not necessarily prevent injury, but it will certainly mitigate the injury. It can certainly reduce the injury, and without it, it can be a lot more tragic. So, there's all kinds of ways in which, these kinds of things can happen, and we try to pay attention. And one of the other ones that we're really, really, well, there's two things that are if I have soapboxes. If anybody makes soapboxes anymore, I don't even know. Haven't seen one in so long, but I carry mine around. But one of the big fallouts from COVID is what's called long COVID, and it is a real thing. One of the things that happens when you had COVID, and particularly one of the reasons we were looking for ventilators, is because you weren't having sufficient oxygen going into your body. And the most greedy oxygen user in the body is the brain. And so if you're not getting sufficient oxygen, your brain's not getting sufficient oxygen. And if you're on a ventilator, that means you're really not getting sufficient oxygen, because your lungs aren't able to bring in the oxygen you need. So a hypoxic brain injury means that you're getting insufficient oxygen for a long period of time, which means things can start to die. Parts of your brain can start to die. An anoxic brain injury, which is where there's no air or no oxygen going to your brain, things start dying fairly rapidly. They can die within minutes. And so, what we're seeing is that even people that weren't on ventilators, that lack of oxygen for a very long period of time can create brain injury symptoms. And these are real, the fatigue, the confusion, the fogginess, the balance, the headaches, all of these things are real. And so, one of the challenges we're facing against the stigma for the long COVID is, oh, I had COVID. It was like really bad flu. And yeah, it was awful, but I got over it. So, what's wrong with you? What makes you different? Well, again, every brain is different, every brain injury is different, every brain injury recovery is different. And so that can be very different. And so we're trying to let people know and destigmatize this whole concept of long COVID, because it is very real. It is very impactful. It can challenge, it can challenge your ability to do anything, any day to day, and it certainly can be disruptive to your work. And so, trying to get disability on long COVID is a particular of import to us. And then the other piece is opioid overdoses, because even though COVID kind of took that off the board, we were still getting overdoses, and we have really good responses now with the Narcan, and those being, you don't need a prescription anymore, and you can get them for free, and so at least you can carry them. And so if you have somebody who's got a substance use problem in your family, or you want to at least be prepared, or you're in a workspace that may be working with people that may have substance abuse disorders, you can have that available to you. But with the types of fentanyl and the new, even more synthetic opioids that are out now, it's taking just less and less to do worse and worse. So, despite all that, again, what's an overdose? Well, an overdose is when your brain has insufficient oxygen, and you pass out. And so, and if you pass out, depending on where you pass out, you can hit the ground, you can hit a counter, you can hit a chair. So now you got two brain injuries, right? So people are, I know when my son is drug seeking, or I know when my son needs his drugs or wants his drugs. I know if he's over at this person's house, he's probably doing drugs. I know I can probably point you out to the houses where he's getting them and using them. And I know what he's like when he's on them. Now, I've spent, he overdoses. I spend a week and a half at shock trauma, wondering if he's going to be alive. Now he comes home. Now he's sitting in the basement, lights out, won't even play video games, really irritable, really angry. I've never seen him. I don't know what this is about. I don't know who this child is. The reality is he's got a brain injury in addition to a substance use disorder. And until we start taking a look at through that lens and start treating these folks with that idea, we're setting them up to fail. When we're looking at programs that are absolutely well-meaning and absolutely necessary, and we absolutely need them. But if I have a brain injury, I have a huge, I may have a sensitivity to light. I may have a sensitivity to sound. I may have fatigue. Well, if I've got you in a 28-day detox program, and I make you sit in group therapy at 3:00 in the afternoon under fluorescent lights with a lot of people yelling around and screaming around. And I can see the fluorescent lights blinking because of my sensitivity. The sound is and 3:00 in the afternoon, I'm fatigued. My brain is exhausted from just functioning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're setting me up to fail. And if I'm on some kind of, if I'm on a court-ordered, mandated rehab, I'm going to end up violating just because I can't stand it. And you're going to put me into prison or to jail. And that's the last place I need to be. So, we just need to sort of have, a lot of outreach in those areas to be thinking about. And it's just an additional thing that we need to consider when we're talking about trying to help people succeed and people recover. And that's also why one of our other initiatives is, harm reduction. That can go a lot of ways, and a lot of people fall on two different, various different camps on that. But the reality for us is, if we can ensure that if you are so hooked on your substance that that giving it up or not doing it anymore would be detrimental to your health. If we can get it to where you don't overdose, we're going to prevent a brain injury. Every overdose that we prevent is another brain injury that we don't have to sort of wrestle with. We can just focus on the substance use as opposed to on the brain injury as well. So
I never thought of that. I never thought of, I have friends of all different ages and backgrounds, across this country. And, a lot of the public libraries now are, trying to make sure that people with different abilities have access to tools and resources. So they're doing programs like us, like
Mhm,
podcasts
mhm.
and things like that. But I haven't heard any of them talk about, brain injury in relation to the double whammy of either an accidental overdose or not.
Mhm.
So that's interesting.
No, and the thing is, you're not alone, and one of the reasons we keep talking about it is because, I mean, I have spoken with, county health department doctors, and they're saying, "Oh my god, you are absolutely right. I
Mhm.
haven't really thought about it." And, I try very hard. I try very, very hard, although it's challenging, to not be the guy with the hammer and see nothing but nails, right? Everything's a
Right.
nail, right? So I get it, but the reality is, if you can, and this is part of our outreach. This is why we do this kind of things. Why we do our podcast. Why we do our newsletter. If you can at least put on a brain injury lens, or at least be open to the possibility that there's a brain injury component here, I think it can change your perspective, and it more importantly, it can change the way in which you approach the treatment of that. Same thing with maybe juvenile delinquency in the schools. Rather than kicking these kids out of school because they're quote unquote bad, or they're bad influences, or they can't control themselves. How about take a look and maybe do, and this is one of the things that we have recommended for years, is maybe do some kind of inventory or screening to sort of see if there could be a possibility, a history of brain injury, which can be
Mm,
very likely depending on the socioeconomic background, because we know that tracks fairly closely. So, particularly those that are underreported and underfound. So, if we can find out, maybe this kid was fine in middle school because he could kind of keep up, but now we've changed him into high school. Well, now that brain injury is really impacting because it's a lot more self management, a lot more homework, a lot more stress, larger people, lots more influences, and maybe he's struggling, or she's struggling as a result of that concussion she had when she got knocked off the swing set in middle school, or you know, or was, punched and beaten by his mom's girlfriend, or whatever. So yeah, we need to be sort of aware of that. But once you put that lens on, you can take a look at, maybe can we take a look at people incarcerated? Can we take a look at people that are, in homeless shelters? Can we take a look at people that are in mental health institutions, and see if there's a brain injury piece? And then if we can, let's then use some of the tools and techniques and that we can to work with them on that aspect of it, and then maybe allows us to sort of free up and focus on the other piece.
well, and that kind of brings me to my next question. Rehabilitation costs
Hmm.
through a brain injury lens.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that that is not cheap.
No, it can go, and the range is anywhere from 2,500 to 400,000, and that's per year, and that's per, so it
Is
can
that
go.
like all of Maryland, or is that like one person?
That's like one person. No, that's like one person. It can be, and it really depends on length of stay, the surgical interventions, the OT, the occupational therapy, the physical therapy, the speech and language pathology therapies, all the different therapies that can be used and available. And one of the great challenges has been, it's all insurance driven. So much of it is insurance driven, and so if you go back to, and I was talking to one of our longtime board members, um, when they were first getting into this, you could get rehab that would be between 6 months and 8 months post injury. Now, and the injuries haven't gotten any any lighter, but now you're lucky if you can get about 11 days of acute inpatient rehab. Sometimes it can go longer depending on the payer, depending on the situation, but the vast majority of folks, it's really diminished down to almost nothing,
So it's not sufficient.
simply because of the cost. One of the great advantages of being in the state of Maryland is that we have so many fantastic hospitals, just stellar brain injury programs, gold standard worldwide types of programs. But the reality is, it's also very expensive to be in Maryland. And so while we have access to these care opportunities, it's also can be financially prohibitive to many, particularly those that are either underinsured or uninsured. And that can be really problematic. But you're looking at multiple thousands of dollars at a minimum to hundreds of thousands of dollars, a year to keep folks functioning.
Well, and I guess the thing that I'm hearing is that even with rehabilitation
Hmm.
and all that money put in, that there are long-term effects, especially if they only get 11 days of
Right.
treatment. What are you seeing as like the common long-term effects?
So traditionally, and this is also evolving. Traditionally, you would have mild, medium, and severe categories of brain injury. Mild would typically be resolved back to sort of your more typical day within a matter of weeks or months. Anything longer than say 3 months, it starts getting more challenging or problematic. That's going to be headaches, light sensitivity, smell sensitivity, perhaps, balance issues, cognitive issues, behavioral issues, and those are all in varying degrees. Some of those can come back online, and some of them don't. As you start getting more severe, and this is going to be, the worst car crashes or the worst, skiing accidents or the assaults, the criminal assaults, or multiple overdoses. You're going to start really getting into severe cognitive and behavioral issues, probably balance issues, and that's when you start getting into the more expensive treatments to try and keep people. The other thing too is that there's what they call a comorbidity, meaning that two things can be happening. So, and if you've got a substance abuse disorder, it could be three. Sometimes if I'm sort of on the verge of some significant mental illness and significant mental illness challenges, I'm able to cope, with my I can maybe with my OCD, or I can maybe cope with a little, cope with some of the schizophrenic tendencies or some of the other anxiety or depression issues. I can kind of cope with it. But if I have a brain injury, now that coping ability, that executive functioning that's allowing me to sort of go through my day, that may be gone. And so that's when significant mental illness maybe arise. And so now I can't. Now I have my depression is no longer controlled, or my anxiety is rampant, or I'm paranoid schizophrenic, or all these other different diagnoses. And so you then have both the physical and emotional, cognitive and behavioral manifestation, but you also have these mental illnesses. And the other challenges is when you're trying to medicate for somebody for that, the medications are all designed for people that are neurotypical.
Ah,
And so, if I'm giving you this prescription or that prescription, I know it's going to work, 99% of the time for these kinds of people. But if it's not been tested for people that have had a significant brain injury. So there is a lot more challenge of trying to make sure that the prescription is appropriate, that it's going to work. And then the other thing too is if I've got memory issues, I'm going to forget. Did I take the pill? Did I not take the pill? Where did I put the pill?
mhm.
And so you're adding in this additional level because when your executive functioning is damaged, you lose that ability to plan. You lose that ability, just any of those kind of routines and memories. So that becomes some challenging and problematic for those kinds of folks too. And so it also presents even more challenges of, okay, now you've got somebody who was taking their drugs to deal with the voices in their head. It's now giving me an overdose, so now I have a brain injury. So now I have this craving for this drug. I have an executive function. I was already making bad health choices for myself, and now I don't have the ability to make different health choices for myself. And, my mental illness is raging. And then you get into this sort of back and forth of, okay, who's going to treat this person?
Mm.
Do I need somebody who's going to deal with the mental illness? Do I need a neurologist to deal with the physical? Do I need to deal with a substance abuse counselor or pain management? Because there's significant pain involved, headaches, body aches, those kinds of things. Because your brain controls everything, and if it can't understand the things that are going in and processing them, you start getting all these kinds of issues. And then you start really you add one more component into it, which is age. So as you're aging, things are changing. We've talked about that, your balance and your hearing and your vision those are just naturally occurring. But what if are they accelerated by your brain injury? Are they exacerbated by your brain injury? Are you no longer able to, because your brain controls everything, it can be just, which is one of the reasons why it's such a complicated injury, which was one of the reasons
Mhm.
why it's such an expensive injury, because it's not just put a cast on it, wait 4 weeks, go to physical therapy, go back to the gym, and now you're rock and roll. It can be this evolving thing. And one of the changes that happened last year is that the federal government recognized, or after years and years of trying to change the way in which it's categorized, a portion was recognized as a chronic condition, not unlike diabetes, in that it involves lots of systems in the body. It can be a variety of different things for a variety of different people, and it doesn't go away. It's something you have to kind of live with and manage over time. And that changes the ability to get, well, relatively speaking, with the current system in the federal government, it changed the ability to get certain benefits, around brain injury. Uh, and so we're going to have to see how that manifests, because it only just happened end of last year.
Well, something you said really struck me. Going back to this rehabilitation
Hmm.
of brain injury, and you said that Maryland, if you're going to have a brain injury, be in Maryland, basically, because
Well,
we've
I
got.
didn't say that, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I know,
exactly.
I
We,
know, I
we,
know.
we are very
Uh,
blessed to have some amazing, great hospitals: Shock Trauma Hospital, Sinai Rehab, University of Maryland Rehab, Adventist, NRH, NIH, Walter Reed. The DivPIC. These are all just cutting edge programs that are doing amazing work in brain injury, but they are expensive. It's very much insurance driven.
well, the thing that's popping into my head is, Maryland has a lot of rural areas, and it has. I'm particularly thinking of people in Western Maryland.
Hmm.
Who don't have easy access to Johns Hopkins or
Sure,
UMH well, University of Maryland, and
sure.
how does support services vary across Maryland? Because is there a difference in? I mean, I obviously all the science is the same, and
Mhm.
the end goal is the same, but does access change depending on where you are in Maryland?
No, it's a huge issue, and the way I describe it, is that we have on the I-95 corridor, we have lots and lots of resources. But as you start drifting 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles, 40 miles off of I-95, it starts getting really, really challenging. And when you're talking about the areas like you're talking about, out in Cumberland and Western Maryland, or even if you're talking about, down in La Plata, or on the Western Shore or the Eastern Shore, getting out in those areas too, it gets really, really challenging to find programs that are able to provide these kinds of, really high quality and impactful. So, one of the very thin silver linings of COVID, in my mind, this is my opinion, not necessarily anybody else's, is that the greater acceptance of telemedicine for reimbursement rates. For a very long time, you couldn't get reimbursed unless you physically saw somebody. Or if you did a telehealth, it was reimbursed at a different rate, or if at all. And so with COVID, that sort of created this new opportunity to be able to have, the Kennedy Krieger or the Johns Hopkins, the Kennedy Krieger for kids, or the, Western Maryland could have access to Johns Hopkins doctors through telemedicine.
Mm.
And so some of that stuff would be, let's try to do as much as we can online. And then if we absolutely need to get you in for whatever, to put hands on, or then at that point, we're going to need you to drive into the city, but it's for a targeted purpose. It's not just to go preliminary and do that. You know what I mean? So in that
Yeah, yeah.
regard, it makes it a little bit easier to drive over the mountain, drive over South Mountain, or to drive over the bridge to come in and to get those services. So that's really a benefit. But what it also did, as COVID immediately pounded into the ground for us, you got to have broadband where you are to make that work. And so, this is where I think, maybe libraries were impacted too, because the only person who had broadband in the county at the time was either the community colleges, the schools, or the libraries. But you don't want to have to be talking to your doctor sitting, next to people that are, watching YouTube videos. So it's kind of a back and forth. But the reality is that, and with the changes in telemedicine, that has helped, being in rural health, and we've worked with the Maryland Rural Health Association to try and ensure that we can try to make sure that those kinds of things get out. And then the other thing is we spend, a great deal of time and energy on our website and on our social media stuff, so that people can at least have access to those kinds of resources and at least make phone calls, to talk to us about things. But when you're talking about actual, how many brain injury experts are there in the county health system in Garrett County? I don't know. How many in Allegheny County? I don't know. They would probably try to defer. But again, and that goes to some of the, the underreporting part. Statistically, that if I don't have anywhere to go, then I don't go anywhere. I just
Right.
have to deal with it. Or
Well, I'm thinking of things as simple as, well, not as simple. Diabetes is not a simple disease,
no,
but
right, sure,
things. I'm thinking, just getting an appointment for that can be incredibly difficult.
right.
Telemedicine has helped with that.
hmm hmm
Um,
But then, medication monitoring, it
mhm.
doesn't help the expense of that. It doesn't help really, any of those kinds of things. County health systems were completely hammered during COVID. They're probably kind of recovering, but really not. So they're reeling. And so if I've got a choice between all of these people in my county, if I've got, if I'm in, let's say, Calvert County, and I know that, we've probably got 7,000 people with TBI in my county, which is the of the last census, that's about the number. And I've got 100,000 or 50,000 people with diabetes. I gotta focus on my diabetes
Yeah.
folks. I can't really, I don't have the bandwidth. It's, or the money or the funding to sort of go out and make sure that my people with brain injury. And see, for us, one of the great tragedies in our mind, which we continually try to bring attention to in Annapolis, is, and I think these are, I can't get quoted on these, but the numbers that I can remember that are recent, um, we know that there's probably about 1,500 kids, maybe even closer to 3,000 kids that get taken in, that we know about, to the emergency departments. Some get admitted, some don't. But right now, there's around 250 kids that are designated having benefits in the school system based on TBI.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
even if you take, and that's going through, that's 3 through 18, you know, 200, 250 throughout the state, throughout the entire state of Maryland. And we know that we're getting between 1,500 and 3,000 emergency room visits with TBI every year, right? So even if it's 10% every year, where are those kids? And how are they succeeding? And so, that's why we continue to go back and say, hey, we test for vision. That's really impactful for education. Hey, we test for hearing. That's really impactful for education. We make sure you have your vaccinations, but we don't really care about how you think. How's your brain working? What is more impactful to education than having a functioning brain, or
Yeah.
to be able to get kind of adaptations to test taking times, scribes, um, breaks, those kinds of things that don't necessarily cost a whole lot of money, particularly now with AI. I mean, shoot, I just turn on the thing and let AI write the notes out for me, right? So those don't really directly impactful, but they certainly are impactful to that kid and that kid's success. So rather than maybe allocating them to, you know, kicking them out of school for being quote unquote bad kids, why don't you just give them some stuff to help them succeed once you put on that, your brain injury lens and realize you have an opportunity here. Um, and so those are all missed opportunities we see.
Well, and that actually kind of makes a lot of sense to me.
We like to call it a no-brainer, but that's a, that's an inside joke.
It's not a bad one. I've heard worse.
Yeah.
My partner runs around and tells dad jokes all the time, and I'm just like, all right.
Yeah, a lot of the things that we're advocating for, we think are no-brainers, but whatever.
So I know that the Brain Injury Association of Maryland does a lot of advocating,
Hmm.
and that's part of the reason I really wanted you to come on,
Hmm.
and to talk, because I think it's so important to um, advocate for better care, better access, assistive technologies, things like
Hmm.
that. What
Right.
programs are in place to prevent brain injuries? You had mentioned something really cool where you had said that you got a law passed where kids have to have a helmet on a horse.
Hmm.
You know, I know that people keep going, "Oh, they're just riding a bike. They don't need to wear a helmet.
Right.
Fine,"
We struggle with that too. Yeah.
But what is
So
coming up?
yeah, so I will tell you that a lot of what we do is outreach, just to bring awareness. People, it's like, I didn't really think about overdose. I really didn't think about COVID. I really didn't think about maybe domestic violence or human trafficking as being impacted by brain injury. The individuals that are, trapped in those kinds of situations may be impacted by brain injury. So we try to bring awareness and outreach on that. Like I said, we just finished Winter Sports Brain Injury Awareness. That's January. Another thing that is coming up is March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. We'll have an awareness day on Capitol Hill to try and bring awareness to that. The TBI Act, which we thought was going to be passed in the last Congress, didn't quite pass. And so the TBI Act funds a lot of brain injury programs throughout the country. It helps support CDC investigations into brain injury. And so that's another thing that we're trying to see if we can make sure that that continues. So we advocate for not just ours, but for all states, individuals with brain injuries to have the funding needed, because it's such an important, 2 million people a year in the
Yeah,
United States are affected by this. And so that far outweighs many other diseases that are funded, rightfully so, that they should all be. But the reality is this one is very impactful. So we're doing that. We'll do awareness day there. We've done awareness day in Annapolis during March. We have an annual conference. This, I think we're coming up on our 40th annual conference.
oh
Close,
wow.
maybe 38th or 9th. Anyway, we've been doing it a very long time. We bring in people from all over the country, typically have between 350 to 400 people there for over 2 days. That'll be April 3rd and 4th. So that's one of our outreaches that we do. We bring people, individuals with brain injuries, family caregivers, educators, healthcare professionals come in, and we learn, talk about the latest and greatest things and cutting edge stuff that's going on in brain injury research, brain injury outcomes, in addition to things like mindfulness, and taking care of caregivers and those kinds of programs. And then we have Stroke Awareness Month is May, so we do outreaches there. Um, and we go to Maryland Rural Health Association, their conferences, to try and make sure that we put, and then we sit on a lot of work groups and a lot of training groups. And then one of the things, as we're recording this on January 30th, I'll be going to Annapolis on Tuesday to testify in opposition to a new Senate bill, which comes out every year, to try and have motorcycle helmets, the requirement for motorcycle helmets be removed, so that people can ride on Maryland roads without ride on motorcycles on Maryland roads without helmets.
No, that's a bad idea.
Well, we
I
think so too. There's a chunk of folks that don't think it's a bad idea, and so every year we have to try and convince the legislator that motorcycle helmets is a good idea.
I actually witnessed a really bad motorcycle accident, about a year ago, right near my house. And everyone doesn't realize. I mean, people don't realize that a lot of accidents happen very close to home.
Sure, absolutely.
But this gentleman was riding his motorcycle, and he was not wearing a helmet. He was not wearing any body protection at all. He was, no shirt and jean shorts, and he popped a wheelie. And he was two cars in front of me, or two, vehicles in front of me, and he popped
Hmm.
a wheelie as he was riding in the middle of the road,
Hmm.
and he landed straight head down and skidded probably 30 feet across a 2-lane,
Hmm.
road
Hmm.
into oncoming traffic. And all of us stopped. We all, we got him into an ambulance and things like that. But just the idea, of, that could have been a brain injury ready to happen.
I will tell you right now, and I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, but I will tell you right now, that's a brain injury involved for sure.
I
Absolutely,
mean,
for sure.
my stepkids love to ride their bikes without their helmets, and that drives me nuts.
Mhm.
And I'm very much a helmet person. So just because I have seen through years of working with the public, people who've had stroke and had traumatic brain injury, individuals who've fallen.
Mhm.
I just don't want to see that happen to people I care about. So wear the
Absolutely.
helmet.
Yeah, and our mantra is, if there's a helmet for your sport, wear it. And there has been some awareness, with some of the football players now wearing the extra protection over their helmets,
Mhm,
which may or may not. You just got to recognize that, helmets are designed, and even the tiny little language on the back of the disclaimers on all of the helmets is, it's prevents brain death. That's what it's designed to do. It's just prevent for you to die, not die. And if
mhm.
you don't die, then it's done its job. But the reality is, um, without that helmet, things would get a lot more complicated, a lot quicker, and can affect a lot more things. And so, one of the challenges, particularly with kids wearing bike helmets, you know, they're going to mirror their peers. Number one, so if you can make it cool for their peers to wear their helmets or have helmets, and then number two, they're going to mirror what their parents are telling them or their parents are doing. So if mom and dad are wearing helmets when they ride their bikes, uh, you know, as younger kids, of course, then they're going to probably more likely to wear their helmets, particularly if mom and dad say it's okay. When they become teenagers, of course, they stop hearing what comes out of the parent's mouth. But that's when it becomes so important to make it cool to wear a helmet. Um, and so anything we can do to advocate to try and make it cool to wear a helmet. And a lot of the X Games folks, they wear helmets, and a lot of so some of these kids, some of the folk, skateboarders are a little bit better about wearing helmets. I was distressed, some of the advertising for the Olympics with skateboarding the folks didn't have helmets on the advertisements, but when they were actually doing it, most of them were wearing helmets. So, um, yeah, try to make it cool. That's really the challenge.
Well,
So
I want to tell people how to get in touch with you,
sure.
because your website has a wealth of information,
Hmm.
and it's written in a lot of ways that makes it accessible. When you're dealing with something as detailed and as verbose.
Yeah,
And
complicated. Yeah,
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 complicated, that's a better word.
yeah.
Complicated as brain injury, the
Hmm.
language, can get really difficult,
Right.
but, I really have to commend, the Brain Injury Association of Maryland for making it an accessible language.
And we're constantly working on that because we constantly recognize that there are lots of, brain injury creates visual issues, brain injury creates auditory issues, brain injury creates confusion. So we're always trying to get the maximum amount of information on, but we're also trying to work on the wording. We're trying to reduce the wording, create pictures. And so we're never done. We're always trying to make it better and more accessible. So I really appreciate the compliment because we do spend a lot of time trying to make sure that, in this huge panoply, this huge umbrella of issues that we can speak to we can, bring information in some component about it. So www.biamd.org is the website. If you're interested in getting the newsletter, which now goes out to almost 10,000 folks.
Oh, wow. Oh,
So
wow.
it's called Five Thoughts Friday. It goes out every Friday at 9 o'clock. And we get three stories typically on brain injury research, but it can also be stroke recovery, mindfulness, different ways of dealing with the challenges of brain injury. We talk about military stuff. We celebrate individuals with brain injuries and their success stories. Then we have a book recommendation, and then with a link to the book if you're interested in getting it. And then we have a quote of the week to send you off on the weekend to sort of inspire you to take the day. If you don't have a chance to check it out on Monday, we resend it out on Monday morning so that you can have another opportunity to take a look at it. And it was started as a sort of a summer project because I got tired of sending out emails. Please send me money. Please join my event. Please come to this thing. It was just like nag, nag, nag. So it's like I wanted to put something else out. So we created this newsletter to go out, and it was a 3-month test just because I didn't know if I was going to have enough information. We don't write the stories; we're curating the stories. But
Mhm.
is there going to be enough out there? And I think we're going to hit 8 years. We're coming up on 8 years of doing this every week. So there's always something going on. And again, once you kind of open up your eyes a little bit and start paying attention, brain injury touches everybody. Everybody knows somebody, whether they know it or not, who's had a stroke, who's had a brain injury, who's had brain cancer, who's had an operation. Everybody knows somebody.
So the Brain Injury Association of Maryland, again,
Hmm.
the website is B as in boy, I as in ice cream, A as in apple, M as in Mary, D as in David.org.
Hmm.
And the
Or you can,
telephone
is 800-221-6443. Thank you. Yes,
800-221-6443.
that's right.
And, like I said, guys, the website is very accessible in the language and the layout. I have not yet looked at your newsletter, but I will definitely sign up for it.
All you got to do is go to the website. There's a button that says Five Thoughts Friday. You can click on the button, just give us your first name, last name, and email address, and then we'll ship it off on on Friday at 9 a.m.
All right. All right. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing, your story for your organization and the hard work that you're doing to advocate for people who have brain injuries.
Well,
Uh,
thank you so much for the opportunity. I mean, if there's a message to take away from everything that I said, because I know it was kind of a data dump, the reality is you're not alone. You're not alone. It's a very isolating injury for both the family and the individual, but you're not alone. The Brain Injury Association of Maryland is celebrating its 42nd year right now, and we were created by individuals who are trying to support family members with brain injuries. It's what we do. It's baked into our DNA. And we just want to make sure that people know that they're not alone. They're not going through this alone. They don't need to go through this alone. There is help. There's stuff available, and we're there.
I'm glad to hear it. And I look forward to talking to you again sometime in the future.
Thanks so much for letting me be here.
All right. Well, guys, this is coming out in March, so make sure you share it with friends and family and don't hesitate to reach back out to us at the library because we do have books to support brain injury. And for those who have print disabilities related to brain injury, they qualify for service. So make sure that if you have friends or family that you are sharing our information as well. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to see what's coming up in the future for you.
Thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you soon.
This has been a presentation of the Maryland State Library Agency. For links to additional resources provided by today's presenter, please visit the show notes. For more information on MSLA or the Maryland State Library for the Blind and Print Disabled, visit marylandlibraries.org.